What would you do if, on your 60th birthday, your own daughter betrayed you in the most heartbreaking way? Laura had spent years raising her daughter alone after Charles Gavin abandoned them for another woman. But when a video surfaced showing her daughter Allison, calling that very woman Mom, Laura's world crumbled. What do you do when the child you sacrificed everything for turns her back on you? Don't miss this emotional journey filled with betrayal, regret, and eventual realization. My channel is struggling, so if this story intrigues you, please comment 1 to help me out. Thank you for watching. I truly appreciate it. Subscribe to see how it all unfolds, and I wish you good health. After a decade of marriage, Charles Gavin shattered our vows. He brought his mistress's 2 children into our home, claiming they needed a father and deserved compassion. But when our daughter Allison clung to him, her face drenched in tears, begging him to stay, he didn't hesitate for even a second. I refused to argue. I filed for divorce, taking Allison with me, ensuring she wouldn't suffer in a fractured family dynamic. I never remarried. Years passed and Allison built a life of her own. She found a loving partner and they had a daughter, my granddaughter, who became the light of my life. I devoted my days to caring for her, filling my heart with love and purpose. Life felt full and content. On my 60th birthday, Allison and her husband informed me they were swamped with work, and my granddaughter had an unexpected tutoring session. They assured me we'd celebrate the following day. That evening, while casually browsing social media, I came across a video taken at an opulent hotel banquet hall. There, standing in the midst of a celebration, was my daughter, her husband, and Charles, gathered around a cake. The 2 children Charles had chosen over us stood beside them, their faces alight with joy. 6 people joined in song, wishing a happy birthday to the very woman who had destroyed my marriage. And then my daughter turned to her and uttered a word that shattered me: Mom. The weight of that word crushed me. Allison had been so insistent on making my 60th birthday grand, refusing my suggestion to keep things simple. Mom, I've seen everything you've done for me, she had said. This is my way of showing my love. Let me handle it all. Her words had moved me deeply. Over the years, I had raised her alone, witnessed her milestones, supported her dreams, and cared for her child. My son-in-law, Benjamin, was a kind and respectful man, treating me like his own mother. My granddaughter, Lily, was my source of joy, her sweet voice filling my home with warmth. I had been happy. With time, the sting of Charles's betrayal had dulled. So when Allison insisted on throwing a special celebration for me, I allowed myself to look forward to it. As you age, you long for warmth, the laughter of loved ones, the presence of family. The thought of being surrounded by them brought me anticipation. On the morning of my birthday, I woke early, dressed carefully, and took Lily to school. Allison and Benjamin enjoyed the breakfast I had prepared before heading to work. Allison reassured me they would finish early and return home to celebrate. I waited. I kept busy tidying the house while glancing at the clock, excitement bubbling inside me. But as time stretched on and they still hadn't arrived, a gnawing unease settled in. Just as I reached for my phone to call Allison, it rang. Mom, something urgent came up at work. Benjamin's voice carried guilt. We just can't step away. We might not be able to celebrate tonight. Disappointment pierced my heart, but I pushed it aside. It's all right, I said evenly. Work comes first. You two focus on your responsibilities. I'll pick up Lily from school. Oh wait. Allison suddenly interrupted. Mom, it's your birthday. You shouldn't have to run around. A friend of mine is nearby and will pick Lily up, bringing her to my office. Just relax at home, okay? I hesitated. Are you sure? You have so much on your plate and Lily is still young. She might be a handful while you're working. Allison's voice sharpened. It's fine. My friend is already on their way. Don't worry. Just rest, okay? I have another meeting now. I have to go. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at my phone, silence pressing against me. I sighed, brushing away my unease. Allison had been under immense stress lately. I chose to be understanding. I went to the kitchen preparing a warm meal to comfort them when they returned. By the time dinner was ready, the house was spotless. With nothing left to do, I finally sat down and scrolled through my phone. A random tap opened the nearby section, and on the first video thumbnail I recognized her instantly. My daughter. I clicked it. The video showed a private dining room at a hotel. Allison stood at the table, Benjamin holding Lily's tiny hand beside her, all smiling. Then the camera shifted, revealing the person I despised most, Charles. My heart clenched. We had once been young and in love. I believed we'd share a lifetime of happiness. But in the 10th year of our marriage, he chose another. His first love, left widowed with 2 children, received his compassion, his devotion, while I received divorce papers. He had stood before me, arms wrapped around her children, telling me, Ethan and Olivia need a father. I have to be there for them. Our daughter Allison had clung to his leg, sobbing, pleading. Yet he didn't falter. He turned away and never looked back. I never begged. I took the divorce settlement, more than half of what he owned, and left with my daughter. I changed her last name to mine. To protect her, I never remarried, dedicating my life to raising her. And now here she was, standing beside the man who had discarded us. She had reconnected with them in secret, forging a bond one never imagined possible. As the birthday song rang through the video, my stomach twisted. Charles's first love stood at the center of the celebration, radiant, adorned in elegance. And then, with a soft, affectionate smile, Allison whispered the words that broke me, "Happy birthday, Mom." My phone slipped from my fingers, crashing to the floor. The video looped, but I couldn't move. A dull ache filled my chest, not just pain but disbelief. Allison, my Allison, the child who had once clung to me, who had seen our suffering firsthand, had chosen to embrace the woman who had torn us apart. The sharp scent of something burning pulled me from my stupor. I had left dinner simmering. Rushing into the kitchen, I turned off the heat, my mind spinning. In my distraction, I reached for the pot without thinking. The scorching metal seared my skin. I recoiled, pain flaring, but before I could tend to it, the doorbell rang. A delivery driver handed me a cake. I had ordered it myself, just a small one. Even if no one else would celebrate with me, I could at least mark the occasion alone. I set the cake on the table, lighting the candles, and closed my eyes. For years, I had wished for Allison's happiness. For her to be loved. For Lily to grow bright and strong. But now I wished for something different. I wished to finally live for myself. As the clock neared midnight, the front door creaked open. Allison tiptoed in, freezing when she saw me. Benjamin and Lily trailed behind her, their voices falling silent. Lily, ever the little actress, ran to me, arms outstretched. "Grandma, I missed you. Hug me." But I didn't lift her up this time. For the first time in my life, I couldn't pretend anymore. I looked her straight in the eye and asked, "Allison, where did you go today?" She tensed, her eyes darting nervously, trying to find an answer. But in the end, she chose to pretend not to understand. "What do you mean, Mom?" "I was at work, of course," she replied, glancing at Benjamin and Lily as if seeking backup. Benjamin immediately nodded in agreement. "Yeah, Mom, work was crazy today. I've been on my feet all day. My back's killing me." Lily, eager to mimic her father, shook her head so violently that I wondered how she didn't get dizzy. "Grandma, we didn't eat cake today." "We didn't," she added, her voice trembling. "Children are terrible liars. The more they speak, the easier it is to catch them." Allison barely had time to cover Lily's mouth, but the damage was done. She could only offer an awkward smile and tried again. "Mom, don't misunderstand. Lily got restless at my office, so I bought her a little cake to keep her busy." The lie was weak, almost laughable. The disappointment in my chest settled like a heavy stone. Without saying a word, I pulled out my phone, found the video, and placed it in front of her. She froze, her mouth slightly open, searching for an excuse, but no words came. After a long, defeated sigh, she sank onto the couch beside me, all pretense falling away. When she finally spoke, there was a sharp defiance in her voice. Mom, it's been so many years. I know you hate Dad, but he's still my father. For your sake, I've barely seen him these years. Haven't I done enough? You're not getting any younger. Why can't you just let it go? And even if you can't, why drag me into it every year on your birthday? Have I ever not been here for you? Catherine's birthday is on the same day as yours. She never says it, but she wishes our family could be whole again. So I thought, what's the difference? We all live together, so why not celebrate hers first and yours tomorrow? Mom, you're getting old. Stop being so childish. Benjamin and I work hard every day, and honestly, it's easier for me when I spend time with Dad. But look at you acting like this. Can't you think about me for once? Her words hit me like shards of ice piercing through my already frozen heart. I studied her carefully. So, you're saying I've been stopping you from reconnecting with your father? She turned her face away, silent. I scrutinized her face more closely. She didn't resemble Charles at all. She had my features. Maybe that's why, after the divorce, Charles poured all his fatherly love into Vivian's children, especially Olivia. The first time I met Olivia, she was 6, and even then she looked just like Vivian. Because of that, Charles adored her. I remembered Allison, heartbroken and confused, sobbing in my arms. Mom, why doesn't Dad want me? Why does he want to be someone else's father? Doesn't he love me anymore? I had held her tightly, her small body trembling with grief, and I thought how cruel it was for my child to have such a heartless father. But now, looking at her and hearing the words she spoke, I realized the joke was on me. Allison didn't seem to notice the shift in my tone. Instead, she clung to my arm and whined as she always did. Mom, that's not what I meant. But think about it. Dad's old now. No matter what happened in the past, I still carry his blood in my veins. Isn't it time to let go of the resentment? And Vivian, she's actually a really nice person. Back then, she took Dad away because she was worried about her siblings growing up without a father. But she apologized to me. Mom, she even buys me gifts and treats me like her own daughter. So why keep holding on to something that happened so long ago? You're old now too. Why not just move on? I stared at her, unable to suppress the bitter laugh that bubbled up in my throat. Charles, the father who had abandoned her without a second thought. She had spent countless nights crying in my arms, asking why he didn't want her. And Vivian, the woman who had destroyed our family. Just because she bought a few gifts, Allison had so easily forgiven her. I yanked my arm away. So, in your eyes, I'm just being unreasonable for not forgiving Charles and Vivian? Allison nodded, her expression matter-of-fact. Well, yeah. I was just a kid back then. Any anger I had has long faded. When I close my eyes now, all I remember are the happy times. How good Dad was to me when I was little. Mom, I want us to be a family again. Can't you see that Catherine is actually really nice? Maybe the two of you could even be like sisters. Before she could finish, my hand struck her across the face. She let out a sharp cry, stumbling back, clutching her cheek. Then, glaring at me, her voice rose in fury. Mom, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you hit me? No wonder Dad preferred Vivian. She's gentle and sweet, not some bitter old woman who can't let go. Tears welled up in her eyes, and before I could speak another word, she ran to her room, sobbing. Benjamin and Lily rushed after her, their voices filled with concern. The door wasn't fully closed, but I could still hear their muffled whispers from inside. She's getting senile, hanging on to some ancient grudge forever. No wonder she got dumped. What a cranky old hag. And then words spoken by the daughter I had loved for half my life. At that moment, something inside me finally broke. I stood up, went to my room, and began packing my things. For years, Allison and Benjamin had worked hard, but with housing prices so high, they were still paying off their mortgage. I had felt sorry for them, so every month I helped cover their expenses. Not just the mortgage, but utilities, groceries, even Lily's art lessons. I paid for it all. But now I was leaving. I wouldn't be giving them another cent. Whether they could afford their home without my support was no longer my concern. What Allison didn't know was that I had another property, one I had never told anyone about. I had bought it long ago just in case. I had been wary of Benjamin, afraid that one day he might betray Allison the way Charles had betrayed me. So I kept the house in my name, planning to leave it to Allison after I was gone. But now that was unnecessary. That house would be my refuge. With my remaining savings, I could live comfortably on my own. When I stepped out of my room, Allison was still crying. The small cake on the coffee table sat untouched. The candles never lit. Everything looked pitiful. So I grabbed my suitcase and without hesitation I walked out the door. By the time I settled in, it was already 3 o'clock in the morning. I took a shower and lay down in bed. When I checked my phone, there wasn't a single missed call, not one unread message. She was my daughter, the child I had raised for over 20 years, and yet nothing. The thought made my heart ache. But maybe pain was a good thing. It would stop me from second-guessing myself, from foolishly convincing myself to turn back. I canceled my usual morning alarm, turned off the lights, pulled the blanket over me, and pushed all unnecessary thoughts from my mind. I didn't sleep well. My dreams kept pulling me back to the past, to the years when Allison and I had only each other, back when Charles was determined to divorce me. Even though I walked away with most of his wealth, Allison was still too young. The betrayal had shattered her little world. She was so traumatized that she couldn't even go to school for a while. I had no choice but to quit my job and stay home with her. She was restless at night, waking up screaming from nightmares, crying out for her father, begging us not to leave her. So I would hold her close, humming the lullaby I used to sing when she was little, sitting by her side for the entire night. By morning, her breathing would be steady, her face peaceful, and I, my back sore and arms numb from holding her, would struggle to move. Back then, Allison would notice my discomfort. She'd take my hand in her tiny fingers and start massaging my arm, whispering, "Mommy, I'll make it better. I'll make the pain go away." She was such a sweet child. I let out a long breath and opened my eyes, picking up my phone to check the time. Even though I had canceled my alarm, years of habit woke me up at the usual hour. On any other morning, I would have gone straight to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Then I'd wake Lily, who always refused to get up right away, preferring to roll around in bed while I coaxed and carried her. I'd help her wash up, braid her hair into neat little pigtails, and sit her down for breakfast. Once she was fed, I'd take her to preschool. By the time I got back home, Allison and Benjamin would have already eaten and left for work. Then I would start cleaning up, washing the dishes, and tidying the house. My entire day revolved around them. I never had a moment to myself. But now I got up and only needed to make breakfast for myself. After eating, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. A slow, peaceful stroll with a bit of jogging mixed in. It was the kind of unhurried, comfortable life I had been craving. But before I could even finish my walk, Allison's calls began flooding in. I ignored the first, then the second, then the third. By the time the fifth call came through, my finger accidentally brushed the screen, connecting the call. I didn't put her on speaker, but Allison's voice was so loud it hardly mattered. "Mom, where the hell are you? Why aren't you answering your phone? What happened to you? Have you lost your mind? This is too much, don't you think? It's time to stop." I couldn't take it anymore. With a swift motion, I hung up, blocking her number. I wasn't about to listen to her tantrum anymore. I just couldn't. "I don't want Dad anymore," she sobbed, her small body curled up against me. Her voice, barely a whisper through the tears, trembled as she spoke. "It's just us now, Mommy. We're the only family we need. I want to have your last name so we can always be together." Her words cut through me, leaving a raw emptiness that I hadn't known existed. Allison had decided to sever every last connection between us and the man she had once called her father, erasing the remnants of what had once been. She no longer wanted his name, nor did she need him. It was as if he had never existed in her world. I held her for a moment longer, my arms wrapping around her tightly, but inside, a storm was brewing. My mind whirled with a chaotic mix of emotions, but one thing became perfectly clear. I had been living for her. For her future. For her happiness. And yet, every promise I had made for her to stand on her own, to build her life and make her decisions, had led to this moment. A moment where she wanted nothing more than to sever her ties with me, her mother, the one who had given everything for her. I lifted my hand slowly and wiped the tears from my face. I had made my decision and it was final. Do whatever you want, I said, my voice calm, devoid of emotion. Your name. Your life. It has nothing to do with me anymore. I looked at her, my heart torn but my resolve firm. I had nothing left to give her, not when she had so casually tossed everything aside that had once meant something to me. She blinked at me, confused, unsure whether she had heard me correctly. But there was no changing my mind now. My voice softened, but only slightly. I'm done. I can't be your mother anymore. You're an adult now, Allison. You've made your choices. I have to live with mine. She looked at me for a moment longer, searching for something, anything, that would give her a reason to keep clinging to the past. But then she simply nodded, her lips trembling as if she was on the verge of saying something more. But no words came. I watched her walk away from me, each step heavier than the last. The weight of it all pressed down on my chest, suffocating me, yet I stood there motionless, letting her go. This was what she wanted after all. She had made her decision and I had made mine. On the way home I didn't glance back. I didn't look for any signs of hesitation. I didn't wait for a change of heart. I blocked her number, every trace of her, severed every connection we once shared. My hands were steady as I deleted her from my life. There would be no turning back now. When I sat down to check my savings, the reality of my situation hit me. It wasn't just about the money I had left, but about the future I had once envisioned for myself. A future where I could still find joy in living. For too many years, I had poured everything into Allison, forsaking my own happiness. Every promise she had made to me about what we would do when she grew older had never materialized. And now the world was wide open, free of the heavy chains I had bound myself to. With a deep breath, I opened my laptop and booked a group tour. For the first time in years, I was doing something for myself, not for anyone else. The thought of seeing the world, mountains, oceans, cities, and forests, without the worry of being home to cook dinner, or of receiving another angry phone call from Allison, filled me with a sense of peace I hadn't known in so long. I felt lighter than I had in years. During the tour I met Vanessa. She was in the same group as me and we bonded almost instantly. Vanessa had lived a life similar to mine. Dedicated to her family, putting her dreams on hold for the sake of others. She too had given everything she had to those she loved, only to have them dismiss her in the end. Her family had scorned her for daring to live her own life. They had told her she was too old, too tired, and too selfish for travel. But like me, she had reached her breaking point. She had taken her savings, cut ties with everyone, and decided to see the world. We spent days laughing, sharing our regrets and our dreams. There was a beautiful comfort in knowing I wasn't alone, that someone else had lived through a similar kind of heartache. Vanessa understood in a way that no one else could. But just as life seemed to open new doors for me, trouble reared its ugly head once again. On the tour there was a man, a widower who was more than eager to find someone to share his life with. He was older, but he seemed harmless at first. That was until he learned I was divorced. His eyes lit up with that unmistakable glint of opportunism. He offered me a deal, a life of leisure in exchange for companionship. He'd give me his savings and in return I would cook, clean, and take care of him in his old age. I laughed at first, but he didn't get the hint. Not even when I turned him down politely, nor when I made my excuses. Excuses. The man showed up at my door, a bouquet of roses in hand, his voice dripping with insincerity. "Laura, think about it," he said, flashing a smile that couldn't mask the desperation in his eyes. "We're both getting older, you know. I'm still a handsome guy and walking around with me would make you look good. You've been alone for so long, aren't you lonely?" I stared at him, my anger rising. In my younger years I would have chased him away with a broom, but now I was older, wiser, and much less concerned with being polite. "No," I replied firmly, and then without thinking twice I called the police. But he didn't leave easily. His voice echoed down the street as the officers escorted him away. "You're heartless, Laura. You're still young. Don't you want companionship?" he yelled as he was led away. My gaze hardened. I had been heartless once years ago. But now I was just tired. I didn't need a man. I didn't need anyone. It was my turn to be free. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, Allison appeared on my doorstep, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she spat, her voice sharp with anger. "You're really trying to get yourself a new husband? A stepfather for me?" Her words hit harder than any slap. She was angry, but it wasn't the kind of anger I expected. She wasn't concerned about me. No, she was mad because she thought I was trying to replace her father. As if that was the only thing that mattered. The layers of betrayal and resentment rose to the surface. She swung her purse at the man, the anger pouring out of her in heavy, hurt-filled strikes. "What were you thinking, Mom? You're at the age where any man who shows interest in you is just after your money. And you actually fell for it." I didn't flinch. I didn't shout back. I just stood there, numb to her accusations. Mom's voice had always been warm, but this time when she tried to enter, Vivian wouldn't even allow her across the threshold. Her voice was cold and dismissive. "I only recognize Ethan and Olivia as my children. You're just an outsider." The truth hit her like a ton of bricks. She had never truly been family. She had only been a pawn in their game. Alone and broken, she wandered the streets aimless until one memory resurfaced, the thought of going to her mother's house. That night, Allison stood outside my door, exhausted and uncertain. Maybe, just maybe, she had begun to understand the depths of her cruelty. She had lied to me, betrayed me, and taken my love for granted. She even had the nerve to stand in front of me and mock me. But now she had nothing left. Her hands shook as she pressed the doorbell. When I opened the door, I felt no surprise, no anger, just a calm emptiness. Allison opened her mouth, but the words never came. Her throat was dry, and before she could stop herself, tears began to well in her eyes. "Mom, I was wrong," she whispered. I didn't respond immediately. I simply stared at her. What was I supposed to feel? Bitterness? Sadness? Satisfaction? Or maybe nothing at all. But then flashes of memories from when Allison was younger came to me, of the years when it had just been the two of us. The silence stretched heavy between us before I spoke. "Wrong about what?" Her breath caught in her throat as she tried to steady herself. "I shouldn't have lied to you. I shouldn't have stood by their side. I shouldn't have hurt you. I shouldn't have assumed you would always forgive me. I should never have ignored everything you did for me." She kept going, confessing every wrong she had committed, apologizing again and again as though sheer regret could somehow rewrite the past. I listened, not interrupting. When she finally fell silent, I said nothing. Instead, I stepped aside and offered her a chance to enter. She didn't force my forgiveness. She knew she had lost that right long ago. The only thing left for her was to prove herself. She moved in without protest, without complaint. She didn't demand that I love her the way I once had. Instead, she started learning how to cook, clean, listen, and care for me as I had once cared for her. She no longer expected me to welcome her with open arms. She simply stayed. As time passed, so did the walls I had built around my heart. I still acted distant, still kept my emotions locked away. But the bitterness, the resentment wasn't as intense as it had been. One morning after returning from a walk, I passed by a bakery and, on impulse, bought a box of Allison's favorite pastries. I didn't say a word when I placed them on the table. I simply left them there. But when Allison saw them, her hands trembled and tears welled in her eyes. Maybe I hadn't forgiven her. Maybe I never would. But I was at least willing to give her a chance. Years later, Allison had rebuilt her life. She found stability in her work, regained her independence, and eventually moved into a small apartment not far away. She continued to visit me regularly, bringing fresh flowers, homemade treats, and walking with me in the evenings. For the first time, our relationship was no longer one-sided, no longer just me giving and her taking. We had found a balance. One day she arrived with a tray of homemade cupcakes. As she placed them on the table, I took a bite and nodded slightly. Not bad. Across from me, Allison's lips curved into a soft, genuine smile. We both knew that we could never go back to what we once were, but at least we had a future ahead of us. What do you do when the person you love the most betrays you, only to come back years later, broken and asking for forgiveness? Laura spent years raising her daughter alone, loving her unconditionally after her husband, Charles, left them for another woman. For decades she kept her heart open for Allison, giving everything she had to their relationship, only to find that on her 60th birthday, Allison had chosen the very people who had torn their family apart. The video of Allison celebrating with Charles and his new family shattered Laura's heart. But it wasn't just the betrayal that stung. It was the realization that her daughter had moved on without a second thought for the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. When Allison finally came to Laura, admitting her mistakes, it wasn't about a simple apology. It was about understanding. She needed to prove herself not with words but with actions. Despite the pain, Laura allowed her to try. But the question remained, was it enough? Could Laura forgive her daughter after everything that had happened? Perhaps the most important lesson here is that sometimes forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about finding peace for yourself. What do you think? Could you ever forgive someone who hurt you in such a way, or would you walk away completely? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.